On reflection, I think the lack of budget might be showing. So it's been a little while since I vlogged, a couple of weeks. This has been a period where, as so many of you suggest in the comments, I have just been focusing purely on my thesis and not worrying about YouTube. You'll probably be able to work out when I filmed this because it was when I wasn't really uploading anything other than the Wikicast. I have been focusing on my thesis and that has been paying dividends. Whee! Now I'll talk about the various things that are going on in the thesis later on in the week as we come to them. You actually joined me halfway through today. I'm currently walking back to uni. Look, that's the white balance and pointing difficult. That's the uni. And I'm walking back to the uni because I did a full morning's work. I actually had a really productive morning, moving around everything in the first results chapter, doing some coding, getting some statistics stuff ready and pounced to go, and yeah, just generally getting my life sorted. But then I went home to drop off, well, I basically had to do a few errands, really. It's pretty boring, in town. Oh, the cats are here! So one of the reasons I love walking along this section of path is there are like 4 cats who are very friendly. You might have seen on my Instagram I got used as a step ladder by a cat earlier. There's one of them up here. Here. You are just desperate for all that attention, aren't you? Any day in which you pet a cat is a good day, and that's the second cat of the day for me. I'm on a great day. What was I saying? Oh yeah, so I was talking about chores in town. Yeah, basically I did that, and now I'm going back to uni. I'm going to pick up some lunch, and it's back to work on some statistics. Ooh, exciting. So I've just got the office to myself. Everyone else has left. It is... wow! It's only 5:45. Why is everyone leaving so early? Anyway, I've got the office to myself. Oh, I bet it's because it's daylight savings and the outside looks like that. So this is my current working setup. Basically, I have a plan in my notebook, which I'm enacting on this computer. This is the thesis writing computer. Basically, just because I find it easier to do coding on here, or there are other reasons, but like I find it easier to do coding on here and to run stuff from the terminal here, and then do the write-up on here, just because you've got a bigger keyboard. So I've been writing up the new version of chapter 4, which is the first results chapter, which I've now got this sort of revised plan for. A lot of it isn't really changing, like the science isn't really changing. I'm adding a column. Basically what I've done is compare 2 things before, like observations and predictions, except it's not observations, it's reanalysis, but that's like a whole other thing. But I'm comparing observations and prediction, and effectively I'm just adding another column to that where I'm comparing one set of predictions to another set of predictions, which use less information. And so I'm rearranging what I've done before and rewriting sections of it. So I've been doing that on here. Those lovely juicy statistics have been running in the background. I've got 2 processes running in the background. Zoom in on these. You've got one process this is just working out the standard deviation of a bunch of data. It's a massive data set, so it's taking a little while, but that's then saving. So it's basically to make things like plots more easily readable. And on this side, there's another set of PV inversions, because I might potentially be adding yet another column which uses a different subset of the data. Oh, it stopped. Hey, it's going again. So today's been a really good day for the PhD. I think basically I had 2 good nights sleep in a row, and I suddenly feel human again. I've been working my way through this. I feel like I'm on top of it. I've got basically I want to be finished in 3 weeks. And I've got my sort of 2 results chapters. They are half written. They're in a state of writing, basically. Doable. It's definitely doable in 3 weeks. I'm going to be here until about a bit past 7, so another hour and a bit. Just got to grind now. You know, the data is now available. One of the scientific problems with the chapter before was that I didn't have the right set of data, or rather, I didn't have enough. Now I've got that. Now I'm writing it up. Just got to work. And the funny thing is, I'm very good at just working. What am I doing? I think we've already come across the major problem with vlogging at the moment, which is that my life is fundamentally quite boring right now. I got lunch. Yeah, my life is basically here in the office with my terrible backlighting and my 2 computers. There's only so many ways you can film this. It's not interesting, guys. What is interesting is the fact that I'm really wonky. What is interesting is the work that I'm doing. I'm actually now, somebody commented actually the other day, just going to date this, as if I don't put the date. I literally said the date. Somebody commented saying, basically, you know, are you just pushing through now? You don't find this interesting anymore? And the answer to that is, I think up until recently, yeah, I just didn't find it interesting. I was bored. Really bored after 4 years of this project, and I'm pretty sure every academic I've spoken to about this has said, when I said I'm sick of it, I'm really sick of doing my PhD by this point, I don't mind admitting that, and they were like, yeah, that's how it is for everyone. So I don't feel bad, but at the same time, recently it's got more interesting, re-looking through the results, and actually this new direction that my second supervisor has sort of put on the thesis has made it interesting again, which is great. It's actually really cool, some of the stuff. I'll talk about what I'm doing specifically in a later day in this episode. But suffice to say, at the moment, I'm writing up. I've got a list that's 2 A4 pages long of things that I need to do this week. So, eating lunch in the office. I'm going to be here late this evening. Yeah, my life's work at the moment. Look at that graph. Isn't that a nice graph? Oh, inaccurate. So we're later in the afternoon. It's about 3:30. I've just been doing some more writing up. You haven't been missing out on much like you haven't been missing out on much in the past few weeks. I've been writing up. The first meat section is basically finished. I need to discuss one more figure which is currently generating at the moment. But other than that, actually pretty much on schedule for completing this chapter by the end of the week. Things are okay. Now I'm going to be returning. See, I look this time. I'm going to be returning to the office later to do some more work. But for now, I'm popping into town to do a photo shoot. I've agreed to take some photos of the chapel choir when they perform in the cathedral today. So that's where you're going. Wow. Here. So at the moment the cathedral's decked out for remembrance, which if you're not from the UK you might not know. People wear a poppy as a sign of remembrance for those who died in, well, conflict generally, but generally it's sort of associated with the First and Second World War, specifically the First World War. And so the poppy has become kind of symbolic of the whole association, and so what you've seen here is there's an awful lot of them in carpets, especially with this being 100 years on from massive battles in the First World War like Passchendaele. Incidentally, if you want to learn more about the First World War, I highly recommend the channel The Great War. I think I've plugged them before, but goodness me, fantastic educational channel. Go check them out. So it's a kind of somber, quiet time at this time of year. I mean, it's actually Halloween today, which means that it's 11 days until Remembrance. Although I did notice back here. Where are we? I was just kind of absent-mindedly looking through the plaques. There's loads of history here. For example, the guy who founded Exeter College, Oxford, was a bishop here. I didn't know that. But there's a plaque here to 2 people, a completely normal plaque to find in the cathedral. But I noticed that the lady died exactly 208 years ago, today, on October 31st. I just thought that was kind of a weird coincidence. Well, that's done. Always a pleasure to work in the cathedrals. They had a selection of artefacts out from their archives. There's so much history in this building. Apart from all the murals on the wall, which you saw, I'd love to do a video one day. There's the astronomical clock in there and the 16th century cat flap. There's so much. Now, though, I'm just going to pop home to drop off these extra bits of camera equipment. Sorry about the bells. And then I'm going to go back to the office. If these things don't drive me mad first. And we're back here in the office. Again, it's Halloween night and I'm doing the scariest thing of all, which is to sit alone with my thoughts. You're never going to finish that. There is no way that you're ever going to see fireflies Its wings are too small to get its fat. I am currently running several scripts at once. I am running I'm running the first version of this script, which is meant to be, well, all these plots are meant to look like this one in the middle, but with more lines. I'm not quite sure why it's not working. That's why this is the first version and not the final version. I'm also running this little script, which is interpolating some stuff from, whoa, Michael Bay's directing, which is interpolating some stuff from pressure surfaces onto Z surfaces, but it's yet to kind of get going. It's been like this for a while, probably because I'm creating quite... Oh, hello. There's the camera. Yeah, well done, Simon. Probably because I'm creating quite a large data set and it takes a little while to kind of get going. And then on the big old computer, I'm also running something on the cluster, which is another set of inversions, the same as was going yesterday. That will probably finish on like Friday, maybe. But basically, yeah, I'm going to be here for a few more hours yet. It's just turned 7, and I've got dinner with me. I've got this big old list in my book. I'm going to tick off a bunch more things because I need to. Do I look tired? I think that's the least of your worries right now. Okay, it's 10 o'clock and lots of really good progress. Loads of really good progress, actually. Smashing through a bunch of things to do on the to-do list. Yet again, there are loads of programs running. Programs which it's one of those most satisfying things in the world where you write computer code and you run it and like, okay, you put it through the terminal and you think, let's find the first error. And it just works. And it's like, oh my god, I'm not a complete idiot. I am recording. Yeah, I am recording. So this next section of this chapter, which is looking at mass fluxes using different data sets, this is all stuff that's going to, hopefully I'll come in tomorrow. There'll be 2 nice juicy data sets that I can come in and plot nice and easily. And I've actually got stuff ready, like the plotting code is written. So that's cool. Yeah, really happy with the progress today. Like, just knuckling down. It is, however, 10, and I probably should go home because I've got more work to do. I did that really funky transition with the cathedral. I should probably do something similar here, right? It's how I fast travel, as long as there aren't any enemies nearby. Alright, we're fast travelling to my room. Go. And we're here in the room. This is my... Oh, she's not even in the Exeter anymore, and I still haven't to pixelate Pixel Girl's face. Oh, just as I sat down, it changes to me with John and Hank Green. That's a bit better. No, wait, I didn't mean like... Not gonna lie, this was pretty amazing. So this is the kind of time, like 11 o'clock, that I would normally be editing, but other projects have kind of got in the way. So first of all, I need to take the files, the photos from earlier, and put them in my Lightroom and fiddle about with them so they can be used. Actually, no. First of all, I need to change. I got these new pajamas. Check it out. So yeah, I'm importing the photos. That's what I was saying. So the photos have been imported. There's like quite a few of them from the shoot today. It was really difficult conditions. It was just so dark. You can probably see it in these pictures. This is before any grading. But yeah, this was really quite tough. These are going to be graded at some point in the future because I've got something else to work on, which is down here. Bang! So something I don't think I've actually ever mentioned before is, well, Chapel Choir has a CD, for one thing. That's definitely something I've mentioned before. I designed this. I didn't record it, whereas normally for all the video and audio stuff for the Chapel Choir I record it, but we had some guys come in to do it from the cathedral. But I designed the album art. That's a picture I took of the sunrise from a field by the uni, and I did the back, and there's also a booklet in here. This one's unopened, but there's a booklet in there with information about it. Now, 2 years ago I designed all of that in GIMP, which is the free version of Photoshop, whereas now I actually have Photoshop. So I'm in the process of basically doing all that again, but I'm doing it in Photoshop, which means it's so much faster. Also, it has to be faster because I literally have an hour or so a day to work on this before I go to bed. It's come together pretty nicely though, if I may say so myself, considering I taught myself to use this program last week. I'm pretty pleased. So this is all subject to, hang on, let me zoom you in a little bit. So this is all subject to change, but this is probably what the CD cover is going to vaguely look like. It's really cool to be able to just construct it, because this is completely constructed. If I go through and like build everything up, in the background there's a photo which has got like, what's it called? This is where my lack of knowledge of the program shines through. An opacity mask, that's the one, and various like smart filters applied to it. But then on top of that, then there's also light, and that comes in different flavors, like there's different gradients and sort of fake bokeh in there. And then there's some cloth in there, which was originally a completely different sort of, well, it's not even that colour for one thing, it's that colour that then gets graded, and then there's a snowflake which goes on top of it. You're probably not really interested in this, I'll be honest, but to me it's cool. And then of course you've got the text at the top. Like, I think, and I've done a fair bit of design work in my time, admittedly not using the software. I think this is one of my best things, my best bits of, I'm not going to call it art, but you know what I mean? Best bits of work. So yeah, if you're wondering why I haven't been editing, it's been because of this, because of the CD, and that's been keeping me awake. So I'm going to do about another hour or so of this, and then I'm going to go to bed. Really excited to go to work tomorrow. This is going to be good. We're going to get this thesis done. So everyone else is headed out to lunch, which is why I am now free to talk to you. And look, there's light outside. I'm actually well lit. There's a decent contrast to me in the background. Like, I do know what I'm doing when it comes to camera work. I don't normally film during the day because I'm normally here at night. That doesn't even make any sense. Wow, I'm tired. So this morning, I have been working, surprise, surprise, on the next section of the thesis, which is the mass fluxes. And I just got something working before, basically, hang on, let me show you. Basically, these curves represent different things. Let's look at the top one. So this represents the density anomaly at 20 kilometers in the atmosphere. So this is longitude. This is along the line of constant latitude at 65 north, wrapping around the pole. So the observations, this is calculated from the hydrostatic relation, for those of you who are wondering, are in black. And then these are two different approximations using two different bits of information. Basically, the blue line is using information from the whole atmosphere. And one of the things I'm doing in this thesis, one of the key things, is working out whether you can do some calculations using just information from the stratosphere, which is what the little subscript S stands for. So the red curve is pretty close to the blue curve. So in this case, 20 kilometers out, it's in the stratosphere. So you kind of hope that, come on, focus. You kind of hope that the stratospheric stuff would work. So this is for the, it is different. There is still a fundamental error between these two observations, and that's bigger when it comes to the velocity, and then the mass that's fluxed across that latitude line. They're actually not bad. Like, the errors kind of cancel. So up until about 20 minutes ago, that wasn't working at all. I was getting stuff that was ludicrously large, like about 100 times wrong, and I was trying to wrap my brains for why it was wondering what was happening. And I finally caught it, as is always the case. I swear to God, every time I have tried to be clever in this PhD, every single time I've been like, oh, you know what? Cheeky. I'm just gonna do a little shortcut there. Never work. You can't try and be clever in a PhD. You have to be dumb to do one of these. You just have to plod along and not be imaginative. Because as soon as I did things, sort of the more, I don't want to. Basically, I was trying to reuse another variable and like kind of do a cheeky bit of manipulation, and it just didn't work. Did that though, and it now works. Well, I showed you the stratospheric fields. So this is at 1 kilometer up. So this is definitely in the troposphere. And look, there's the blue curve is, there's an error, but it's basically the right kind of idea. It's definitely an offset. But the red curve, there's just no information there whatsoever. It's not predicting much of a density anomaly. And then if you look down, velocity, it's not bad. It's pretty close in parts. About half of the time it's pretty close for the blue curve, and the red curve is just kind of hopeless. And then the mass flux, again, the errors kind of cancel for the blue curve, but the red curve, you're not getting anything from that. Up until that moment, I was definitely having one of those mornings which happened quite frequently, where I just wasn't really like connecting with the work, and I was like, oh, why isn't this working? Come on, like, just throw me a bone here. And then I caught that numerical error, and I was like, it just suddenly, I'm like, oh yes, come on. It's taking pride in the small victories, is what I've learned. Is like, you've just got to latch onto something like that and use it as a springboard to motivate yourself and to work more. So that's good. That now means that I can run a long version of that. That's for one day, what I was just showing you. I want to do that for all days in the data set. There are 55,000 time steps, so I'll set that running. That'll probably finish overnight. And in the meantime, I've got more stuff to write up. Also, something that happened this morning, I'm going to get awkwardly close. Yep, that's awkwardly close enough. How expressive can I be with my eyes? So, I had a rather interesting email today from Google about something which I can't talk to you about yet, but something very interesting happened today. I'm really, really excited about this one. I can't act with my eyes. So it's currently mid-afternoon, and much like yesterday, I'm taking a quick foray out of the office for about an hour. Again, because of chapel choir. So technically, I'm not a choral scholar anymore, because I did my 4 years of uni. But some of the basses that they do have this year are ill, so I'm depping. I'm literally not doing the rehearsal, because I already know the music. Just turning up and singing, so this should be fun. So I just tried to record some of the rehearsal, but I turned the camera on just as we finished the last thing, so... Sorry, no music in this one. Well, seeing as most of you apparently hate music being in the vlog. And it's dark now, so that was fun. I was sight reading Fair is the Heaven by William Harris, which is not the easiest thing to sing in the world. I did the bass one part before, but it's double choirs, two choirs singing at the same time. So I did one bass part and I was singing the other one. I think I might have pushed everybody out of key for a little bit, but we recovered in the end. And well, you know, you should listen to it, by the way, if you don't know. It's an amazing piece of music. So it's like 7 now. I'm just going to get something to eat from the marketplace, and then I'm going back to the office to pick up where I left off earlier with some of this mass flux stuff, which is getting there. It's actually starting to work. So this evening I've been working on a new bit of the thesis which only came into existence a week ago. A month until hand-in, not a problem. Which is extending some theory that I derived for the thesis and basically picking apart different contributions to it rather than looking at the kind of the atmosphere as a whole. It's saying like, where does this bit come from? Where does this bit come from? I'll fully concede it's been quite a frustrating evening. It's currently 10 o'clock and I'm not going to go home because I have won, quote unquote. I haven't fixed it. It's looking a lot better than it did and it's making more sense than it did, but I think I'm just going to let it run overnight, generate a bunch of data, and then see what the statistics on it look like. Like the individual cases I'm looking at don't look good, but it might be on the whole it's actually okay. I'm just annoyed, very annoyed. Like the rest of today has been finding these small problems and fixing them and improving and iterating, and I feel like this hasn't followed that pattern. This has been just kind of crap. And it's not working no matter what, and I know that this code is doing exactly what the theory says it. You know, I'm supplying the code with a discretized version of the maths, but it's not working. Why won't you just work? All right, there's two things running on there. There's something, oh, you can't actually see it. There's something running on that computer. More things have been ticked off. Not as many as I'd like. It might well be that I've actually worked the stuff out correctly. This is what the theory says. It's just that the theory is bad, but like I wasn't expecting it to be that wrong, and I was expecting it to be wrong in different places. So, you know, maybe this is right and this is actually more interesting, but yeah. Not a happy bunny. Anyway. Now's the time to go home and, what am I doing? Oh yeah, more design work. What else do you do with your evenings? So I was walking home and I've calmed down a bit, and who do I bump into?
Oh, look.
It's vlog favourite.
We're back.
It's Sue Perkins.
It's been hi, guys.
How's your career been after Bake Off?
Oh, it's been sparse.
So Dan and I have, well, we're still on speaking terms after I moved out.
We are.
How is the new housemate?
Look, it's a different vibe. It's a different vibe, it's safe to say.
Here is an actual picture of Ed Dunn's room.
It's just a mess, isn't it? It's beyond a mess.
You didn't realise how lucky you were.
Oh.
So this is the first time that you've appeared in the vlog for a little while.
Yeah.
What would you like to catch up the internet on?
Oh god, it's just been there's too many things happening. There's so many things happening.
He's a very busy boy. If you want to hear more from Dan and I, we have been doing a weekly podcast, and it actually has been weekly for the past 2 weeks. We missed a couple.
Yeah.
But yeah, we have our own podcast, the WikiCast, and if you like us, then you should just check that out, because it's basically the only way you're going to get us together on a regular basis. Because although this is 2 nights in a row I've bumped into you walking home. You've been leaving rehearsal and I've been leaving work.
Completely spontaneously too. I didn't realise. I was just coming home from University Singers. Plug. It's cold though.
It's bloody cold. It's really, really cold. It's like 5 degrees. You can see your breath. And it is November. So
1st of November.
Ow.
You bitch.
Hello and welcome back to the PhD office. So, today's been a bit of a weird one for filming, because this is the first time I'm doing something to camera, and it's currently 11:15 in the PM. So what did I do today? Well, I've been working. I've been writing stuff up in the thesis. It's been a good day for getting plots in the thesis, actually. Some really good stuff, and writing up, and like the page count's going up, and basically things are going well on that front. I then went home to record the WikiCast. This is me recording the WikiCast, and to get some CD stuff finalised. Then I came back here at about like 4, and I've been working since. Pretty solidly working up until like 10, half 10. I had dinner here, had another delicious microwave ready meal. And that leads us to here, where I'm going to put the camera down here in a different part of the office, so that, there's a little bit of variety. And then I'm going to talk to you about what I'm actually doing this week in terms of research. So if you're new to the channel, my thesis is in atmospheric physics. Specifically, I'm looking at the dynamics of how the middle layer of the atmosphere, the stratosphere, couples to the lowest level of the atmosphere, the troposphere, and the surface. We know that it happens in these events called sudden stratospheric warmings, which are these big violent events in the mid-atmosphere. And I've basically come up with a hypothesis, which is that there's a field in the stratosphere called the PV field, which causes effects at a distance, basically. And when you get a sudden warming, there's a big change in that field, and what I'm looking at is whether that is also seen in the far field effect. That's like the PG-13 simple version. So what's new this week is that I mentioned that you had this variable PV, right? But it's not just in the stratosphere. You can define PV, which stands for potential vorticity, anywhere in the atmosphere, and you can get a useful thing out of it called the stream function, from which you can work out the velocity and the temperature and a whole bunch of other stuff, like the pressure anomalies, for example. And you get it through a process called inversion. You invert the PV to get the stream function. Now, you can invert any PV distribution to get an associated stream function, and there's a form of PV, it's like an approximation to the true value of it, called QGPV, or quasi-geostrophic potential vorticity. Awesome. And the cool thing about that is that it's a linear equation. Basically, you can take 2 blobs of PV, like of QGPV, and invert this one, and then take that away and invert this one, and take that away. Combine those 2 stream functions that you've gotten together, and it's exactly the same as if you'd inverted them both being there, right? It's a superposition. If any of you are doing physics degrees, that might sound familiar, because it's exactly like electrostatics. Up until this week, I've been inverting, so remember that's how you get the stream function, the useful thing from the PV. I've been inverting the entire QGPV distribution for the whole northern hemisphere, because that's the way you get accurate, velocities and temperatures and whatnot. But what's been different this week is that I've actually been considering just the PV, the QGPV, from the top bit, which is in the stratosphere. So from about 15 kilometers to about 40 or 50 kilometers up, just using that bit of information. And the point of that is to see, one, you can invert all the PV, QGPV, and see if the quasi-geostrophic assumptions that go into making it, if those assumptions allow you to do other stuff in the atmosphere. Like it allows you to calculate pressure changes, for example. That's one thing which this thesis is doing. But crucially, the second thing is that it's asking the question, can you do that only using that stuff in the stratosphere, in the upper part of the atmosphere? And that's something that I couldn't answer until this week because I didn't invert just that PV. That's what I've been doing. And the short answer to the question, can you do it with just the stratospheric stuff, is it's no. Does this mean that my hypothesis is incorrect? Well, I don't know, because this is the first results chapter where I'm looking at this in a broad context. Like, does this work for every time step, for every day of the year, does this work? And the answer seems to be no. The signal's just not big enough in the lower part of the atmosphere when you just consider stuff that you're only using stratospheric QGPV. But the next chapter is looking at these huge events, the sudden stratospheric warmings, and seeing if the hypothesis works there. So it's possible that it might still work. My guess is that it won't. But I'm holding out hope that I might get something interesting to talk about in my Viva. So yeah, that's what I've been working on. And writing. I know that somebody's going to ask this. Yes, I'm writing my thesis in LaTeX. The idea of doing it in Word makes me feel physically sick. If certainly in the earth sciences, I have probably getting on for 100 equations in this thesis, if not more. Doing those in Word would be a nightmare. It's so easy to do it in LaTeX. I also don't have to worry about my bibliography because I'm doing that via BibTeX. I'm using Mendeley, which is a bit of software where you put PDFs in of papers and then it will generate a .bib file, which is .bibliography file, which then gets read in by LaTeX and it generates the bibliography and all your citations automatically. So that's pretty neat, I'd say. And also LaTeX is kind of like the industry standard. It makes everything look nice. It means that stuff like table of contents, list of figures, list of tables, all update automatically. Everything just looks pretty peng, really. It looks nice and scientific. And because somebody will also ask this, I have no doubt I am doing it in Kyle, which is fine, really. It's got a built-in little button that you click it and it makes your PDF and you don't have to go into the command line. That's pretty cool. Would recommend. So yeah, things are kind of coming together. It's kind of slow work. Although, if you look at the chapter at the moment, there's a lot of good stuff in here. Like this is now several pages of really quite solid science. There's some good figures in here. Communicates the points. I think this is much, much better than it was. So honestly, I don't mind staying here until late because this is the way things get done. Nothing of note has ever been achieved without hard work, so I don't mind putting this work in. I am very, very tired, and it's going to be, I think, another 3 weeks of really intense effort. But then, touching wood with all my might here, then we should be done. Then I should be done, and I can hand in and take a break. Good God, breaks. I remember those. So it's just hit 11 o'clock. I am just going to set one more bit of code running, maybe write a to-do list of what I'm going to do tomorrow morning, then I'm going to go home, and I am finalising the CD designs and putting the last few bits, like finishing touches in, and then that should be done. Hey! Wow, I look kind of crazy. I was talking to Pixel Girl last night, and I feel like writing this thesis at the moment, this chapter, because basically the tail end of it is where I wanted it to be anyway. I'm rewriting from the beginning, and I feel like it's almost like when they made the Channel Tunnel, and they had two tunnels, and they met in the middle. When you're tunneling, you don't really know how far away you are from the other one, because you can't see through the rock. But science. But I feel like I'm actually probably closer to making the two ends meet than I realised. Like, I'll probably get to a point writing and be like, oh wait, hang on, all this stuff is now still applicable. Like, I still need to redo bits. I need to widen that tunnel, I guess. Like, I need to add another column to all the plots and to the discussion. But like, the structure is there. I've just got to kind of keep going until you break through. Getting there. I'm getting there. Beginning to drive me nuts. Ugh. Definitely the first take. Nighttime. Daytime. Nighttime. Nighttime. Daytime. So I'm back in the office. I promise I actually did leave. I had lunch in the Ram. I had a nachos that was meant for 2 people, but I kind of ate it by myself. Anyway, I've been working all afternoon, and I just discovered something. Hello. I've just discovered something rather cool about my research that I didn't know until like an hour ago. So before I can explain what's so interesting about this figure, I need to talk to you about some maths. So there's this concept in maths which is kind of everywhere that people mostly take for granted called linearity, right? And a function, which is something in maths where it's like I always think of it as a magic box, right? It's a magic box where you put something in and you get something out. An example function might be, I don't know, f is a function where it takes in 2 numbers, a and b, and it adds them together. And the output you get, f of a and b is a plus b, right? Now, that would be a linear function, because if you were to supply 4 numbers to that, right? If you were to do a and b, f of a and b, plus f of c and d, I don't know, is exactly the same as f of a plus c and b plus d. Had to think then. An example of a nonlinear function might be something like f of a equals a squared. And that's not linear because if you were to do, for example, f of a plus f of b, that's not the same as f of a plus b. And just to put some numbers into there, if a is 2 and b is 3, then 2 plus 3 is 5, so you'd expect the answer to be 25 at the end, 5 squared. But 2 squared plus 3 squared isn't 25. That's going to be 4 plus 9, it's 13. So this function, is a non-linear function. Now I have to be careful with what I say here, just in case anything from this thesis gets published, which hopefully it will. But basically, what I'm working with is a nonlinear function, and like I said yesterday, I'm looking at separating out stratospheric influence on something, right? So if it was a linear function, what I'm working with, you could take the tropospheric information and the stratospheric information, put them in separately, add them together, and then you get the full atmosphere response. This isn't PV inversion I'm talking about, by the way. This is some other combination. It's actually taking the output of that PV inversion, the stream function, and doing some calculations on it. Point is, the calculations I'm doing on that stream function are non-linear. When I looked at the 2 fields separately, basically the tropospheric field was really big, which is what I expected, and the stratospheric field was pretty small, like the results of this calculation, which is mass fluxes. The stratospheric field wasn't really predicting much mass flux near the surface. Expected. The tropospheric field was, again, that was expected. But what I wasn't expecting was, let me show you. So that at the top there is what you see in the real world. Well, kind of. Reanalysis is a weird thing. And that one below it is what you get if you invert the PV in the whole atmosphere, you work out the mass fluxes, and that's sort of what that is. That one below that is what you do if you do the stratosphere in isolation, and that's what you get if you look at the troposphere in isolation. And you'll notice that they're pretty much, if you add them together, you're going to get something like that. But there's this interference term between them. And that interference term is the non-linear part of that equation, where it's this kind of cross term, if you like. The thing to remember is that what I just showed you is the mass flux at a particular height. So as in at 10 kilometers, at exactly 10 kilometers, just how much mass is being thrown into the polar region, which is where I'm doing all of this. Except, that's all well and good, don't get me wrong. But what I'm doing with this mass flux is using it to predict pressure changes. So I'm not just interested in the mass flux at a particular height. I'm interested in all the mass fluxes at that height and above. Like I'm vertically integrating, if you've done high-level maths, I'm vertically integrating that mass flux field above that point. And if you do that, something interesting happens. Because for this particular set of data, that's the observations at the top. That's what the inversion predicts. And you're they're actually, once you start looking through it, they are actually kind of similar. The magnitudes are off, but the pattern's kind of there. The stratospheric stuff, again, it's basically just in the stratosphere above the black line, which is the boundary between the stratosphere and the troposphere. The tropospheric information is kind of as it was, and you'll note that if you add those two together, you're you're going to get something that looks a bit like that. But this interference hello sunshine. This interference term, for example, here, right? There's a big negative event, and you see it. That's the total, which is the sum of this and this. But those two aren't actually that big. This interference term is, though. That non-linear term is nice and juicy. So that will go some way to actually predicting the tropospheric impact of this sort of descending mass flux, this descending pressure anomaly. What that's saying is that the stratosphere on its own, like the stratospheric stream function on its own, doesn't flux mass into the troposphere in a significant way. But the way that the stratospheric stream function interacts with the tropospheric stream function does flux mass, and arguably it fluxes mass of the same order of magnitude or greater order of magnitude than the tropospheric stream function does on its own. That's really kind of cool. So that's what I'm going to be here for the next few hours doing. It's currently, actually it's only 6:30, so I'll probably be here for like 2 or so more hours. And then I need to go home because I haven't got dinner with me, and I fancy actually cooking, maybe. Be honest, we're not going to be cooking tonight, are we, Simon? And I've got to do some editing. Everybody's favourite section of the vlog. And we're back here again. This must be getting very, very boring for you. Imagine what it's like for me. I'm doing the Wikicast. It's 10 o'clock, so I'll probably be editing this for another 2 hours or so, because the podcast's about an hour and a half, and then it takes a little bit more than just the time to listen to it. It's pretty light, to be honest. Like, doing a video for 2 hours would be weeks of work, but podcast that's doable. Actually, whilst I'm on the subject of podcasts, so I listen to a few, not many podcasts. Like, My Dad Wrote a Porno, which is hilarious. If you don't listen to it, check it out. BBC's More or Less, In Our Time. I do listen to Hello Internet, but that's like a long podcast, so I don't listen to it as much as I used to. But apart from that, I don't listen to a huge number. If you could recommend any podcast to me that you think I'd find interesting, please do comment down there, because I'm always on the lookout for new stuff to listen to, particularly when it comes to like long journeys. So yeah, be interested to know your thoughts. Now I need to get back to work. Man, that took longer to finish than I thought it would. It is 1:45. I'm going to go to bed. Well, I mean, I'm on the bed now. I'm going to get in the bed and I'm going to go to sleep. And I'm going to go to the office tomorrow morning and continue writing up and doing a little bit more statistics that need a few more stats that need to be done before I can write them up into the thesis, and then hopefully get really close to finishing this chapter off tomorrow. If I could, yeah, I could definitely do it this week. I've just got to keep pushing. Tomorrow's a very special day. It's a first for me. I'm going to do something that I've never done before, and it's unique to this part of the world. I'm really excited.
Yeah. Flames and death. Yeah. No, well, hopefully not death.
Flames, though.
Look at a nice shot here. Why is it so mad sparkle of your arm? Oh!
I saw the cat licking. Of course you can have it.
I think, ladies and gentlemen, what we